at the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network's 2021 Oregon Cancer Policy Forum. My name is Jamie Dunphy, and I'm the Oregon Government Relations Director. The American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, ACS-CAN, is the nonpartisan advocacy affiliate of the American Cancer Society. We work to pass evidence-based laws and policies to help eliminate cancer and make fighting cancer a national priority. Before we get started, let's go over some logistics. I'm going to do a brief explanation of how to navigate the screen in front of you. On your left, you'll see a list of the speakers for today's event. You can scroll down. The programs and bios for each of the speakers can be found on the previous page as a PDF that you can download. All participants are muted. However, you do have a way to communicate. At the top right of the video feed is a box labeled Ask Our Presenters a Question. This is where you can submit a question for the speakers at any time during the program. Other attendees cannot see what is submitted in this chat box. Please be sure to indicate if the question is for a particular speaker. We'll get to questions after each speaker does their presentation, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. Below the Ask a Question box is the public chat box. This provides an opportunity for all participants to chat with the entire audience. Everything you put in the chat box will be seen by other participants, but not by the speakers. Just to start off the conversation in the chat box, feel free to type in what city you're joining us from today. Also, this event is being recorded so that people who were not able to join us at this time can watch it another time. If you encounter technical problems, this chat box is a good place to ask for help, and our staff will be able to provide you guidance. Below the video feed, you'll see the sponsors for today's event, to whom we extend our sincere thanks. Thank you to our gold level sponsors, Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, Grail, Peace Health, and Oregon Oncology Specialists. Thank you to our silver level sponsors, AARP of Oregon, Genentech, Gilead Sciences, Espousal Strategies, Janssen Oncology, the Oregon Nurses Association, the Oregonian, Pharma, and Pfizer. And thank you to our bronze level sponsor, Astellas. And lastly, thank you to the Pacific Northwest Federal Credit Union for your contribution as well. If you want to enlarge the video screen, hover your cursor over the bottom right corner of the video screen and click on the white arrows. That should get you to the full screen. Then, if you want to go back to the small screen with the other features, simply hit Escape on your keyboard. And in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a Donate button. This is our annual fundraising event, and I'd ask you to consider making a donation to ACS-CAN and our support of our mission. Don't worry, if you click on the Donate link, a new screen will open and you won't lose us. I'd also like to acknowledge the incredible elected officials and their staff who are here with us today. Multnomah County Commissioner Sharon Myron, from the Office of Multnomah County Chair Deborah Kafori, Ms. Nicole Buchanan, State Representative Dacia Graber, State Representative Andrea Balderrama, State Representative Bobby Lee, State Representative Marty Wilde, State Representative Lisa Reynolds, from the Office of State Representative Maxine Dexter, Ms. Lauren Morrison, and from the Office of State Representative Cedric Hayden, Mr. Ben West, from the Office of State Representative Raquel Moore Green, Ms. Lena Pride, and from the Office of Senate Majority Leader Rob Wagner, Mr. Gordon Levitt. All of you are incredible allies in the fight against big cancer, and your work is literally saving lives. Thank you for your service to our community. I did my best to check the attendance today, but if I missed any elected officials or their staff, I sincerely apologize. And please let us know in the comments so I can correct my mistakes. And before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone who is not here, Representative Gary Lee, who lost his life to cancer earlier this year. He served his community through his disease up until the end of his life. We're thankful for his service, and we're sorry for his loss. With all that out of the way, it's time to get started. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Ms. Rochelle Williams-Belizaire. Rochelle is the Assistant Director of Research Collaboration for the OHSU Knight Cancer Institute Precision Oncology Program and its flagship SMART clinical trials program. Please welcome Rochelle.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you all for having us here today. As Jamie stated, My name is Rochelle Williams Belizaire. I am the Assistant Director for the Precision Oncology program here at the Knight Cancer Institute. Our Precision Oncology program includes a number of studies and experiments in the lab, but we also have a portfolio of clinical trials. I want to talk to you about a clinical trials program called SMART. SMART stands for Serial Measurements of Molecular and Architectural Responses to Therapy. But SMART also describes how we learn about each individual participant's cancer. We studied patients enrolled in a SMART trial to a degree not found in any other type of clinical trial. We're all familiar with big data, right? Most clinical trials will gather a massive amount of data on a large number of patients in hopes of providing future treatment options. In SMART, we gather a massive amount of data on each individual participant in hopes of providing treatment options today that are tailored to the patient sitting in clinic. Cancer can be tricky, and often a cancer will adapt to the medicines or treatment you give to treat it and evolve to become resistant to the medication. SMART seeks to understand why chemotherapies can stop working, for example, and then we work to develop new treatments that will stop those cancers from being resistant to cancer drugs. We work to understand more about cancer, and we work to understand more about the participant and their particular cancer. In many ways, we're moving from a reactive treatment strategy, let's see what the cancer is going to do and then find a drug to combat it, to a more proactive strategy, right? Let's see what the cancer is going to do, treat it, but also predict how it might evolve and add other drugs in combination to keep it from becoming resistant. Our goal is to find treatments that last longer, are more durable, and also allow better quality of life, are more tolerable for patients with advanced disease. So our research follows the participant before, during, and after treatment to assess how well the treatments are working. And the therapies we employ are highly personalized to each patient's genetics and the characteristics of the cancer. Every patient's different, and our treatments are tailor-made to each individual. So we currently are using a pool of FDA-approved drugs that we can prescribe, but we're prescribing those drugs in novel ways. In many cases, we're combining drugs that have never been combined before with FDA oversight, and we have had some remarkable results. Because of the level of detail of data we're collecting for each participant, we're able to adapt treatment in real time, changing treatment as soon as we detect changes in the cancer. And once you become a SMART patient, our commitment is that we follow you for life. Even if your cancer goes into complete remission, we want to follow up, and we want to see how your body is reacting, how you've recovered, and we want to learn what we can about how effective we've been in your cancer care. Right now, we offer SMART trials for breast cancer, prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, sarcoma, ovarian cancer, and acute myeloid leukemia. And as we learn and we refine the SMART trial process, we will add additional cancer types. The SMART protocol was developed by a team of OTSU physicians and researchers, including Dr. Gordon Mills, Dr. Joe Gray, Dr. Raymond Bergen, and Dr. Christopher Corliss. SMART is only found at OTSU, and OTSU is uniquely able to offer this program because of extensive investment in genetic and imaging tools we use to study our patients. No other cancer center in the world has this unique combination of tools. In one SMART trial for a form of breast cancer called triple-negative breast cancer, 70% of the participants had an exceptional response to therapy used. An example of exceptional response can be seen on the image to the right. So in the top right is an image of a participant on their first entry to the program. And the multiple dark spots on this scan are cancer. The image in the bottom right is the same participant after being on a SMART trial. Exceptional. In traditional forms of cancer therapy, a 15% exceptional response rate would be expected, and SMART was designed with the hope that we could double that to 30%. So 70% exceptional response is beyond our most optimistic expectations. So why haven't you heard us shouting from the rooftops about our clinical trials and our outcomes? For one thing, it's still new, and we need time to ensure that these remarkable responses will continue to be the norm. Although we fully intend to ramp up smart technology and teach others to use it so that it becomes the gold standard in cancer care, we need to make sure our results are documented and can be duplicated. Another challenge we have right now is that smart participants must be able to travel to Portland for their initial lab work. Thanks to the critical support from grants, donors, and the state legislature during the Night Cancer Challenge, the equipment we have here is unlike anything found elsewhere. And so enrollment in SMART for now is mainly contingent on being able to make your way over to our campus. We hope that will not always be the case, though. The tremendous amount of detail we collect from each patient involves testing well above and beyond traditional cancer therapies, and insurance companies are not yet willing to fund it at all. That means our patients are either able to pay out of pocket or philanthropy has to fund or underwrite the testing. As we continue, as we extend more and more lives and give our patients their quality of life back, our hope is that insurance companies will see this as a worthwhile investment. Our aim is to allow participants to stay close to home and their local support network. We have already supported just a small handful of patients located outside the Portland metro area and across state lines. So we're getting there. But as we move forward, we will engage the Knight Cancer Institute's outreach and engagement program and other principles of public health to allow the data to travel instead of the patient. I'll turn it back to Jamie now, but I'm happy to answer questions at the end. Jamie?
Thank you so much, Rochelle. No, Rochelle will be sticking around for our panel discussion, so if you have any questions for her about her work, please go ahead and type them into the Q&A box below. Our next panelist is Dr. Jacqueline Shannon. Jackie is a professor at OHSU and the Associate Director of the Knight Cancer Institute's Community Outreach, as well as the Associate Director of the Oregon Clinical and Translational Research Institute. Please welcome Jackie.
Hi. Thanks, Jamie, for that great introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to this group about the ways we educate, research, and care for patients, not just in the Portland metro area, but throughout our catchment area, which includes the entire state of Oregon, parts of southern Washington, and parts of western Idaho. There are a variety of ways we have worked with our legislative leaders in the catchment area with great results. Our work with you on increasing the purchase age of tobacco to 21 helped reduce access to tobacco among teenagers, and we have continued to promote and offer tobacco cessation programs throughout the state. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible for people to stop smoking with data that shows that there are positive health benefits almost immediately. We also understand that quitting isn't always easy, but we are here and have resources that can help. We also worked with you on legislation to increase the age for access to tanning beds and on investments to increase our rates of HPV vaccination in the state, among other important initiatives. In each of these areas, we've seen positive and measurable results, and we thank you for being excellent partners in these public health initiatives. In the community outreach and engagement arena, there are a number of things we do in Oregon that are unique to our state and to the country. One is our Knight Scholars Program, in which high school students from underrepresented communities across the state are invited to work with Knight cancer researchers to explore careers in cancer research, prevention, and treatment. This program is unique in the nation in that we provide scholars with 2 to 6 weeks of training at OHSU and then work closely with hospitals, public health, and community-based organizations in their own hometowns to provide educational opportunities locally. Selection into our program is heavily weighted toward racial and ethnic diversity and students from rural areas. Our scholars are paid a stipend and housed in residence halls while they are at OHSU. One of the benefits of the Knight Scholars Program is overcoming the traditional idea that working in cancer care can only mean becoming an oncologist. Though that's a great profession, there's lots of other ways to engage in cancer research. And cancer research and cancer education through public health outreach is also part of the profession of cancer care. And we want to get students excited about all the possible career choices available to them in the end to fight cancer as we know it. Another outreach program at the Knight is our Community Partnership Program. This was created as a result of the Knight Cancer Challenge, which the state support was instrumental in helping us meet. For a little context, Phil and Penny Knight issued a challenge. They would donate $500 million if we would raise a matching amount in 2 years. The challenge was successfully reached in 2015, at which point OHSU began investing in local community efforts at a grassroots level. We believe often that members of a community know much better than we do what their needs and priorities are, and so we work with communities across Oregon to identify the cancer-related needs, enhance collaboration between OHSU and communities to address local cancer issues and cancer health disparities, and foster the skills and abilities of our communities to ensure that these efforts are sustainable for the long term. The Community Partnership Program encourages proposals that address cancer-related health disparities and increase equity for Oregon communities that have been historically disadvantaged or marginalized. We look for projects that address cancer-related health disparities, including disparities related to race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender identity, sexual orientation, geographic location, and disability. At this date, we've funded projects in every county in Oregon, and those projects are incredibly diverse. We've funded community assessments, helped increase access to mammograms and other cancer prevention approaches, helped with HPV vaccination education, worked to educate communities about the links between healthy eating and cancer prevention, created tobacco cessation programs, helped increase colorectal cancer screenings, and funded projects that are aimed at every age in the life cycle, from children through elders. Our reach and impact have been significant. Our biggest job as the Community Outreach and Engagement team at the Knight Cancer Institute is to serve as a bridge between researchers and communities throughout the state of Oregon. We respond to the needs and support the strengths of Oregon communities. We disseminate culturally appropriate, evidence-based cancer information, adapt and test culturally tailored education and outreach activities that address local and statewide cancer health disparities, and we develop and sustain collaborative relationships throughout the state. Most importantly, we're committed to bidirectional communication and assure the voice of the community informs every level of our work at the Knight, from our basic science to our survivorship care. Our Community Health and Research Advisory Council, made up of stakeholders representing our geographic and racial ethnic diversity, has a seat at our leadership table, providing input on our priorities and future directions. We also work with community-based organizations, as well as schools, health departments, hospitals and clinics, nonprofit organizations, governmental organizations, and many more to deliver education and outreach programs. Finally, I want to tell you a bit more about a specific community-centered program that we support, the Healthy Oregon Project, or HOP. HOP is a registry of research participants, most of whom have provided saliva samples so we can screen them for a number of inherited cancers. We regularly survey our HOP participants to learn more about how and where they live, what is important to them, and what they know about cancer prevention and control. This field of cancer early detection and early identification is fairly new, and the implications of having so much knowledge about one's genetic risks are still coming to light. As you can imagine, the further we go down this road of allowing people to understand cancer risk levels much earlier than ever before, the more likely it is that there will be barriers built into our current systems that will need to be reevaluated. We've worked with Oregon's legislature on critical public health measures aimed at reducing risk and incidence of cancer throughout our communities, and we look forward to continuing that collaboration to address barriers for our patients in this new frontier. We aim for a future where Oregonians and people around the world can understand their risks of cancer development and have access to the highest standards of care. The data gathered from this work will also be critical in the creation of new treatments and standards of care that will improve the quality of screenings and assessments for those who have identified cancer risks. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to tell you about some of the ways that we serve Oregonians. And now I'll turn it back to Jamie. Jamie?
Wonderful. Thank you, Jackie. If you have any questions for Jackie, please go ahead and type them into the Q&A box now. And finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Flavio Roca. Flavio is the Division Head of Surgical Oncology at OHSU and the Physician-in-Chief at the Knight Cancer Institute. Please welcome Flavio.
Thank you, Jamie. I just want to kind of reiterate all the great things that were brought up. and thank you for the opportunity to present here to this group. You know, the SMART program that Rochelle described and the community outreach and engagement strategies that Jackie described at the night are really outstanding ways we serve our community in several unique ways. But there are also some medical services that we offer to our cancer patients that are unique, not only to Oregon, but perhaps the world as well, and I want to let you know about them. If we can pull up the slides again. So first, just to let you know that the doctors at the OHSU Knight Cancer Institute are leaders in a type of therapy that's called CAR T therapy. Just want to make sure we have the slides up there. So a T cell, just so you know, is an immune cell that circulates in blood to fight infections. There we go. So as you can see there, the T cells are extracted from the patient's blood. And then a CAR T therapy actually takes those T cells from the patient's body and actually modifies them by inserting what's called this chimeric antigen receptor. So it's almost a target for cancer cells. It's been found to be especially effective for children with leukemia and adults with very hard to treat blood cancers. And it may hold a lot of promise for other types of cancer. As you can see, these cells are then grown in the laboratory and then reinfused into the patient, now with that target or homing beacon that's specific to the cancer cells. Our doctors have been leaders in the community trials around this CAR T therapy. And in fact, we were the first hospital in the entire Pacific Northwest to offer patients Kymriah, which is the first CAR T therapy approved by the FDA. In fact, one of our physicians from the Knight Cancer Institute co-led the first study to outline Kymriah long-term effectiveness. And our doctors helped lead the clinical trial that showed that CAR T therapy for lymphoma not only extended survival, but also improved quality of life for patients after treatment. The Knight Cancer Institute has been a leader in bone marrow transplantation, a type of treatment often necessary for patients with blood cancers or disorders. And to date, we have performed more than 4,500 bone marrow and stem cell transplants in both adults and children. In fact, we're among the top 20 centers in the nation by the number of transplants, and we draw patients from all over the state of Oregon. A bone marrow transplant, it's usually called for when a patient needs to destroy blood diseases and improve the body's ability to produce healthy blood cells. It's a complicated procedure, but our teams are not only experienced, they're performing multiple clinical trials to ensure we are always learning new and better ways to help patients with these types of cancer. Next slide. The Knight Cancer Institute is also one of a handful of centers in the United States and the only one in the Pacific Northwest to provide what's called hepatic artery infusion therapy since 2016. This is a device the size of a hockey puck that delivers chemotherapy straight to the liver to treat colon cancer metastases and primary liver and bile duct cancers. The advantage here is that since drug metabolism occurs inside the liver, the chemotherapy dose is concentrated 400 times directly to the tumor, and there's very little side effects to the rest of the body. Interestingly, this treatment also works when patients have been heavily pretreated with other chemotherapy options that were ineffective. To date, we've put up 35 of these devices, and in fact, we put in 2 devices yesterday for patients that came in specifically for that therapy. Next slide is about brachytherapy. This is another technology that was used for the first time in the Pacific Northwest at OHSU to the bile ducts. So this is a type of focused radiation that's given straight into the liver via catheters that are inserted in the bile ducts, usually for a cancer that can't be removed surgically, or for those patients that can qualify for a liver transplant, and it's used as a bridge in order to treat the cancer while they're waiting for their organs to be available. As a physician on this panel, I can say unequivocally that the pandemic has had a profound impact on my job and my patients. With the lowest number of hospital beds per capita of any state in this country, the COVID pandemic has put a significant strain on Oregon's hospitals and really laid bare the challenges we face in providing complex healthcare services to a growing number of Oregonians with a limited number of hospital beds. As a surgeon, while the word elective surgery seems like something that I can easily be postponed, I've watched COVID surges and staffing shortages lead to the postponement of critical cancer care for patients that require cancer life-saving procedures, including bone marrow transplants, tumor biopsies, and tumor removals. If you know someone with cancer, you know that my patients don't want to wait another hour, much less months, to have their tumors checked or removed, and has a real impact on the quality of life that waiting can have. Even before the pandemic, OHSU was extremely constrained in capacity and in high demand for Oregonians. We were consistently operating at 90 to 95% capacity, with 50% of our patients coming from outside the Portland metro area. We were already making decisions about who to admit from across the state and turning away some patients who needed us because we didn't have the space. With recent strains to Oregon's hospitals due to COVID-19 and sicker patients who have delayed care throughout the pandemic, an average of 54 patients per day are waiting for an inpatient bed at OHSU. Many are waiting for their life-saving operations. After this surge fully rescinds, the backlog of unmet care needs and delayed cancer screening created by the bed and staffing shortage will be astronomical and is likely to fill our hospitals across the state for many more months and perhaps even years. We anticipate this huge influx of patients will be sicker and need more care as a result of delaying care. OHSU is the state's academic health center, and we are charged by our public mission to improve the health and well-being of all Oregonians through the clinical care we provide. In order to do that, OHSU expects we will have to build more hospital beds to meet the needs of an expanding and aging Oregon population, many of whom are low-income and underserved. While the pandemic has exposed significant gaps in our healthcare systems and the care we provide, it also opened opportunities to advance the delivery of digital care in a matter of months that would have taken decades to achieve. Our clinics were able to successfully convert non-essential appointments into virtual appointments, which created greater safety for patients and caregivers alike. This has been a true game changer. The increase in access that virtual care can provide, coupled with patient satisfaction and high-quality outcomes that have been achieved, is truly a sand shift. We, as well as you, are working hard to ensure that these ground shifts, vulnerable Oregonians don't fall through the cracks. Access to high-speed, high-quality internet and advanced technology devices is vital to ensure this critical healthcare modality is available to everyone who needs it. The quick advancement in virtual health has also exposed regulatory barriers that should be reevaluated. Our country has placed the responsibility of regulating healthcare providers and ensuring quality in the hands of individual states. With this individual responsibility, states are reluctant to relinquish control over state licensure requirements for physicians, even while retaining control for disciplinary action. This leads to significant administrative burden and duplication of resources, as physicians must apply for licensures in each individual state where they provide care. This particularly affects us here in the western region of the states, where there's greater distances between referral centers and outlying rural communities. This ultimately limits our ability to collaborate with providers across the country for the benefit of our patients and puts the burden on our patients to travel great distances to be cared for when they could potentially receive that care virtually. This has been especially challenging when we work with members of the Night Cancer Network, such as our collaborators at St. Alphonsus Regional Medical Center in Boise, Idaho, that actually serves a significant amount of our Eastern Oregon patients. Thank you for your attention. I'd like to turn this back over to Jamie now, who will lead us a question and answer session. Jamie?
Wonderful. Thank you, Flavio. Well, folks, if you have any questions for our panelists, please go ahead and type them into the chat right now. I'm going to ask the first question here to Jackie. Jackie, as Flavio just touched on just now, during COVID, routine screenings for chronic diseases like cancer have largely stopped nationwide. The American Cancer Society, we are dedicating a lot of time and energy into getting folks to return to screening. But how has COVID impacted your work, and what are the challenges that you're seeing in getting folks back to screenings and getting folks involved as we come out of this pandemic?
Thank you, Jamie, for that question. That's really been a huge issue for us. Within community outreach and engagement, screening and prevention are one of our biggest topics, really, in the community, and ensuring that individuals have access to both screening, preventive services, and access to treatment services as well. During the pandemic, we were actually involved with a number of other cancer centers around the country in assessing how COVID impacted individuals' willingness to undergo screenings, their fears around screenings, And we found that in Oregon, just like in the rest of the country, people were definitely falling behind. They were not maintaining their annual mammograms. They were not receiving the HPV vaccine. They were afraid to go to the doctor. And it's also been impacted by people losing their job and losing their access to insurance and now having a difficult time being able to really catch up with a lot of those services. So within our program, we spend time working in education and ensuring that people know that they can catch up on these screenings, that specific information around vaccinations, like that they can get their children's HPV vaccine at the same time that the children get the COVID vaccine, even though that was a question for a while. The recommendations are that you can do that all at once and that it's important to catch up on those vaccinations and not let them slide. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it's kind of disappointing. We were making such wonderful strides, really making great progress, and it's taken us back a notch.
Rochelle, you mentioned in your opening that right now you're in the process of time. You need time to continue the science and collect the data and show that these systems are effective. And what are some of the challenges that you see down the line to bringing your program, presuming we have gotten some of the big ones out of the way, the urban-rural divide, people being able to access, ideally, once we get health insurers to accept this as a treatment, what are some of the big some of the general challenges that you see to bringing your program to scale in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Sure. Thanks, Jamie. Great question. I do honestly feel like the biggest challenges really are the logistical components of how we're able to bring to scale the sample collections. Because when I think about bringing the program to scale in terms of, the data, right, and bringing on to other diseases, I think we were able to take advantage of this time of being still and not being able to have patients coming onto campus due to the pandemic, right? Kind of everyone had to modify operations. And so what do you do during that time? You take that time to kind of refine your program and learn more about it. So you run those analytics and you learn more about not just the cancer, but what we're learning about it and how we're categorizing our data. So I think that was how we were able to scale the program from beyond breast to these other diseases. So we did a great job there during the pandemic. And it truly is honestly, a moral, ethical, and just kind of understanding we are able to do this deep analysis. We are able to analyze these patients. We are able to provide optimal treatment recommendations. And then there's that challenge. If we know that there's this novel drug combination that's probably going to work well for the patient, the science, the evidence, the literature is there, we have to fulfill that. Right? We have to make sure that the patients can then get access to the drug. And I truly honestly feel that is going to be the biggest challenge. If we want to benefit all patients, making sure that they get access to these clinical trials, they shouldn't have to travel all the way to Portland for that. They should be able to be in their local support network, just as Dr. Roca and Dr. Shannon mentioned. And so we have to address that and then work closely, collaboratively with the payers, looking at drug formularies, looking at these systems to say, how can we go about doing that? Precision oncology is, definitely on the forefront when it comes to oncology and cancer research, and even the payers are starting to look at that. So how can we look at it together?
I have a comment on that, Jamie. I think Rochelle really brought the point home. Some things that weren't quite covered is that, the pandemic has also affected the way we enroll patients on clinical trials. Because again, a lot of clinical trials mandated in-person presence, in-person consenting. We were able to kind of pivot somewhat into doing virtual visits and so forth for clinical trial purposes. But again, given the technology that's already available, as Rochelle mentioned, there's no reason a lot of this stuff can't be done closer to home. We just have to make sure the regulatory piece follows the technology piece. And to Jackie's point, the whole thing about screening and, screening was traditionally considered elective procedures. And so, but it's really hard to bundle that in when, again, this could be life-saving procedures to actually catch cancers at a stage where we can actually treat them and cure them.
Flavio, question for you. One of the issues that the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network has been focusing on involves multi-cancer early detection. and some of these new tests that are coming to the market soon, including from our sponsor, Grail. Could you describe, could you speak to what the impact of these multi-cancer early detection blood tests could have on some of your programs?
Yeah, well, I think, not to use a pun, but I mean, that's the holy grail of cancer therapy, right? If we can identify, take a simple thing such as a blood test and tell a person who may be at risk of developing a cancer down the road, or they have something, an unstable genome that needs further workup, that's a game changer. That's when we move from, the blunt tools that we have in oncology now, which I happen to use, which is the knife, to a more precision-based approach where we can actually tailor the screening, tailor the imaging, tailor the treatments at an earlier stage. I mean, I think this is the key thing for some of the cancers that I treat, for example, is that the options are limited when we catch things further along their course. So the earlier we can identify, the better off the patients will be. As a system, we will also be better off from a health resource utilization perspective as well. The challenge, which I think we need to get to, is make sure that the test is reliable, efficient, safe, and so forth, because we do have to address, the false negative cases, certainly the false positive, but also the false negative ones.
Absolutely.
I wanted to follow on that just for a minute, because this really highlights one of our real commitments with community outreach and engagement, and that is around trying to bring the care to people in their homes, where they live, in their part of the state. And we have really solid evidence that cancer outcomes are far worse in the rural and frontier areas of our states right now. And part of that is because of they're not detected early, and access to clinical trials and access to some of these cutting edge therapies, and having something available like some of these blood tests that can be made accessible very broadly across the state. We're working now on building that trust in the state and in the communities so that when these things come available, they're taken up by the members of the community. They trust these new technologies and want to work with us on this, and we can in that way have a really significant impact on this pretty substantial disparity.
Jackie, my next question is actually coming to you on that sort of thing. I've heard all three of you really drive home the urban-rural divide that happens in the state. We are a largely rural state with just one real population center and then the I-5 corridor. But what are some of the real challenges? I mean, beyond the obvious challenges, what are the sort of long-term challenges to bridging that gap? And what kind of things should folks think about to to how they can, especially lawmakers, how they could help bring additional resources to under-resourced parts of our community?
That's a huge question. There's a lot of different ways of thinking about that. But, the most obvious challenge that we have in our rural-urban divide is access. It's not just that we have one major urban center. We're also limited in terms of our access to hospital beds and access to some of these services. There's some challenges around education and trust of the medical system, and really working with our communities to help overcome some of those challenges is huge. That's part of why we were really, really committed in Knight Scholars Program to say, this isn't a program just for children who are living within the Portland metro area who can easily get to OHSU. This is a program for kids across the state who may be interested in science, interested in cancer research, and they become our greatest champions because they go back to their communities and they say, I know what this is about. I understand this. Let's do what we can in our communities around cancer prevention. So that was really important to us, and that's building for the future. And it's not going to have an immediate impact, but our goal is that it will have a substantial impact eventually. Another pretty substantial challenge that we have, it's not just unique to Oregon, but we see it here, is that our urban-rural divide is accentuated when we place on top of that some of the disparities that we see in race ethnicity. So a lot of our Latina population, our indigenous population reside in these rural areas. And so we see sort of an accentuation of access and challenges from living rurally to layering on top of that some of the challenges that are experienced by being an underrepresented race or ethnicity. So these are some of the things that we're starting to try and tackle.
A lot of intersectional identities and in terms of the challenges to getting cancer care.
Yeah, I would echo what Jackie was saying. I think it's interesting when you look nationally. You know, the Northeast corridor, the big referral centers are all kind of clustered around each other. If you think, you know, going from New York to Washington, whereas here out west, it's obviously there's a greater physical separation, the geographic, topographic. You know, you have mountain passes, you have things that are not passable during certain times of the year. So we do have, I think, an extra bit of challenge, especially as we try to provide, you know, some of the specialty care that can sometimes only be done, you know, at a referral center. So I totally agree with Jackie's push to bring care to the community, but we should also be helping those that need the services at the tertiary care referral centers with some of their, whether they're economic challenges, transportation challenges. So this is where I think the state can really help us in bringing the patients to the place they need to be for their care.
Continuing on that same line, how do you specifically have a culturally responsive approach to dealing with cancer patients who have a lot of those conflicting intersectional identities in areas where there isn't a lot of infrastructure? I'm thinking, how do you serve Spanish-speaking populations in Eastern Oregon where there maybe isn't a good level of translation services or the community buy-in or community trust? What are some things that you do to try and overcome that as an organization?
Who wants to take that one first?
Is that to me?
I think there's been a lot of, I think there's been good work in this space. So let's think about what Jackie was bringing up and even the Knight Scholars. I think what is so successful about that model is that it's very, let's say, patient-centric, right? You have members of the community, and even better, it's younger generations that have an opportunity to have a rare platform that they don't normally get to not only educate themselves, but to educate those that are supporting the program and providing the resources for them. That creates an advocacy tool. So they can bring it back to their community, just like Jackie said, and be able to advocate for themselves and then be able to say, these are the things that are needed. So it's almost, Jamie, kind of shifting the conversation where we have the medical, scientific, public health expertise, and we're trying to go in there and build customized model and bring in those resources. But you can only go so far, and it really needs to be driven by the community and giving them that platform. And so I think we have made lots of steps and efforts where we're shifting that conversation, and it's more them informing us on what it is that we need to do. And I think that's what's going to be key and important.
Yeah, I think, and on the training piece of that, I think we also need to be cognizant that folks, you know, will be more accepting of advice and medical care when they see people who look like them and speak like them. So I know that, you know, being Latino myself, I really make sure to speak to patients in their own language. And so the more we can attract, you know, our young talent to go into these fields, into research, into medicine, and really provide that support and that mentorship, the more they're likely to go back to their communities and then inspire the patients there and keep the care, as we said, closer to home.
And I want to follow up with one kind of example. Another program that's been really successful, I did mention it earlier with the Community Partnership Program, but this is where we're really doing exactly what Rochelle is talking about, where we're asking the communities themselves, you know, what are the greatest challenges that you're having? And they're creating the projects and they're running the projects. They are the eyes and the ears on the ground there. You know, a wonderful example is a project that's being done in Prineville in Central Oregon. It's a very small, very rural frontier town. Horrible HPV vaccination uptake. Not the worst in the state, but not great. And they actually have a project that we funded that's carried out by the high school students there. And they've managed to bring over 100 people to forums that they've hosted on the HPV vaccine and what it means, and to try and get rid of some of the fears that parents are experiencing around this vaccine. They've been incredibly successful, far more successful than I could have been if I'd walked into that community and said, you need to do this.
Flavio, the Knight Cancer Institute has changed the game for Oregon in a lot of ways over the last 14 years since the Knight Challenge. What do you think the next 10 or 15 years will hold? What are some of the places that you envision this institute moving, and what are some of the things that we need to think about now in order to make that happen?
Wow, again, a quite all-encompassing question, Jamie, but one that I'm happy to tackle. So I think we have lots of exciting things, and I think our mission here is to serve the people of Oregon. But I think given what we're able to do with our scientists, with our researchers, and our pillars of early detection and precision oncology, I really envision the Knight Cancer Institute and OHSU being the referral destination cancer center for perhaps the West Coast. And so I think, we do have that capability. We do have the talent. I think we obviously need to scale our resources, but we also don't want to do that while diluting the care for the patients in our state. So we really want to be able to be that all-encompassing cancer center, provide, the primary care cancers. So we should not just be thought of as the place where folks go when there's no other options. We really want to be at every step of your cancer care, from the beginning to even when the cases are advanced and we may have clinical trial options. So we're here for you.
Awesome. All right, and folks, I got one more question, and it's a for everybody question, and it's a bit of a hot take question. Just this morning, the FDA announced that they were authorizing for the first time an e-cigarette under their clinical guidance, that this was under the premise that of limited risk mitigation for smokers. I personally have some strong feelings about this, but I'm interested to hear from actual scientists. What are your thoughts on this? Is this a pattern we should worry about, or do you think that this is what are your thoughts?
I
know Jackie has some thoughts on tobacco cessation, so.
I do have some thoughts on tobacco cessation. That's a real hot potato question. Because as I understand it, the rationale that FDA put forward was that the company with that particular product had provided adequate evidence that the product's primary use was by adults to use it as a tool for promoting tobacco cessation. And as a cancer prevention and control specialist, I strongly favor helping individuals stop smoking. We use the patch, we use other medications. However, it's challenging to separate the marketing of these kinds of devices and say that one device is only used for tobacco cessation. If it can be a prescribed device, similar to what we've done with some other medications, that is prescribed only to adults, then I think it could be effectively utilized as a tool to assist with cessation. But in its current form, where kids can access it, you can buy it at the 7-Eleven, I think, it's really hard to, for me personally, and this is speaking only for me, not for the Knight Cancer Institute or the university, but for me personally, it's a challenge to really buy into the strength of that evidence.
Yeah, and I'll join Jackie. So maybe just Jackie and I. But I think, we learned this lesson a little bit with the whole vaping story too. That initially was marketed as an alternative, and it turned out to have other issues as well. I mean, I think anything that sort of enforces a habit that's unhealthy is, I think I would quibble with. We do have a significant effort, again, led by Dr. Shannon, with tobacco cessation and trying to identify patients in our system and are coming to our system and really help them get through this process. So as opposed to trying to mask or try to do something that's going to, not that resembles a cigarette, but is not a cigarette. I mean, I think these things are just kind of putting Band-Aids on the actual underlying problem, which is we need to prevent cancer.
Couldn't agree more. And that is actually all the time we have for our Q&A. So thank you, speakers. It was a fantastic discussion. And I think that ending it on the idea is, yeah, we need to end cancer. So thank you all so very much. Thank you to audience members for your questions. And on a personal note, I'd like to note my sincere gratitude to everyone at the Knight Cancer Institute. Prior to my time working for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, I had the privilege of working for Portland City Commissioner Nick Fish. He received world-class treatment for his cancer at the Knight Cancer Institute. And while he lost his fight, his life was significantly more comfortable in the last month of his life. And so thank you all for the work that you're doing. Now, before we close, I want to briefly mention some state and federal work that ACS CAN does. Now, first and foremost, if you are a Washington County resident, please consider submitting testimony to the Washington Board of Commissioners now, who are considering a proposal to end the sale of menthol and flavored tobacco. This is a really big deal, and we're so grateful to the leadership of Commissioner Nafisa Faye, who introduced an amendment that would make this the strongest tobacco control policy in Oregon. And thank you to Chair Catherine Harrington, who has already voiced her strong support for this effort. But we need your help to get this over the finish line. Please consider signing up to testify or writing a letter of support in support of banning menthol and flavored tobacco in Washington County. Now, on the state and local level, ACS CAN has been advocating for greater control over tobacco, including the passage of Measure 108 last November, and then this year's passage of a statewide tobacco retail license in the state legislature. We're now working full steam ahead on the effort to end the sale of menthol and flavored tobacco products in the state. Our work on the federal level primarily focuses on funding for cancer research. ACS CAN has successfully advocated for increases in research funding for the National Cancer Institute, which is part of the National Institutes for Health. Now, this money is important to support all kinds of cancer research that will find new and innovative cancer treatments and eventually a cure. And as I mentioned earlier, we've also been advocating for the Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection Act, which would give Medicare the opportunity to include some of the new revolutionary blood tests for cancer screening, like the one from our friend and sponsor, Grail. These are going to be revolutionary in the fight against cancer. Beyond those traditional roles, ACS CAN is working to elevate the voices of communities of color, to help reduce barriers to healthcare, and to find new and innovative ways to support BIPOC communities. If you're interested in these or any of the issues related to cancer advocacy, please fill out the ACS CAN volunteer form on our state website, which is fightcancer.org/Oregon. As I mentioned before, this is our big fundraiser for the year. If you enjoyed this event today, please consider clicking on that donate button at the top right of your screen. All contributions to ACS CAN in support of our mission, be they $10 or $200, are greatly appreciated. If you missed any part of this presentation and would like to view it or another past event, we have recordings available at acscan.windrosemedia.com in the archive folder. Thank you again to all of our speakers for today's event and to all of the sponsors. And thank you to each of you for joining us today. Your partnership and your support are vital to the work we do. So thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Everyone stay safe out there, wear a mask, and get vaccinated.